And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And tomorrow's flying weather graphic for Monday morning, we've got again IFR covering the Aleutians, much of the Bering Sea extending northeastward here into the Yukon Delta, up into the Seward Peninsula, and then along the southern slopes of the Western Brooks Range, western Arctic coast, and then some VFR for the eastern Arctic coast there, extending down in across south central Alaska, Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay. Much of the eastern interior here, we've got some marginal VFR over the eastern Alaska range down into the Copper River Basin. As you can see, to the eastern North Gulf Coast with a little bit of IFR there around Yakutat into northern Lynn Canal area. But the remainder of the southeast coast, VFR. And then for Monday afternoon, good VFR for much of the southeast coast, getting a little marginal as you head up Lynn Canal and over toward Yakutat, and then some IFR for the eastern North Gulf Coast to about Montague Island. Otherwise, marginal VFR seeping into Prince William Sound, western northern Prince William Sound there, and trying to push into the north of the coast range into the Copper River Basin, but not quite making it. VFR continues Kodiak, Bristol Bay, right on up to the northeast. And then some marginal VFR shifting eastward here with the disturbance coming in from the west-northwest and pushing some IFR there into the Kobuk Valley and along the central Brooks Range. Marginal VFR out to the Arctic coast. Norton Bay, eastern Norton Sound, IFR down along the Yukon Delta coast and Nunivak Island, and then westward across the northern Bering Sea. And the Aleutians, mostly IFR. And for Tuesday morning, some IFR here along the Brooks Range and then up over the eastern North Slope out to the Arctic coast. And marginal VFR right through the central interior becomes IFR here around Healy, Denali Park, Windy Pass down into the western Alaska Range. Most of Cook Inlet and the Susitna Valley staying VFR, and that extends down into northeast Bristol Bay now. And still the Aleutians IFR again with much of the Bering Sea all the way up to western St. Lawrence Island in the IFR zone there. And a pretty good batch IFR now in the Gulf of Alaska here, sliding right on up into Prince William Sound and pulling into eastern Turnagain Arm there and trying to slide on into the Copper River Basin, but not quite making it again. And much of the southeast coast stays pretty good. And VFR for Tuesday afternoon here for all of the Panhandle. Areas of marginal VFR, south central Alaska, mostly south and east of the Alaska Range with some precipitation coming in. And then that extends northward there to the eastern Brooks Range, extreme east side. Pretty good VFR here over the central western interior with the lower conditions again right along the coast up through the Bering Strait. IFR for the central Arctic coast. IFR in the Bering Sea. Some improvement now for the Aleutians, Adak and Atka eastward to Unalaska Island into the western Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR, but the western Aleutians stay in the IFR zone. And then for passes for the Brooks Range tomorrow, IFR both for Anatuvik and Adigan with that moisture coming in from the north or the west-northwest there. And for Lake Clark and Merrill should be another VFR day for Monday. Same forecast for rainy VFR. VFR for Windy and Isabel, Mentesta VFR, and Tanita VFR becoming marginal possibly in the afternoon. Some moisture trying to push up from the south. And Portage, same thing going on there. Marginal VFR spreading northwestward into the eastern entrance. Could spill onto the west side as well during the afternoon hours. And then Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels here, 2,000 feet up over the Chukchi Sea, slopes up to 8 to 10,000 feet there, the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and about 8 to 10,000 feet or so here across southern Alaska and the Panhandle. A little bit higher for the freezing levels out over the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, 12,000 feet plus out in those areas. And for icing, good batch of moisture coming in with some considerable moderate rime icing here, eastern Arctic coast heading southwestward across the mountains there, right in toward Kotzebue Sound, Selawik, Kobuk Valleys, northern Koyukuk Valley, and then some isolated areas of moderate icing here over southern Alaska into the eastern North Gulf Coast. And from there, taking a look at the jet stream. And pretty light winds, 33,000 feet here over the southeast half of the state down into the Gulf of Alaska. Lighter northeast winds now, much lighter over the panhandle, what you're seeing today. And we got some pretty good northwest, west-northwesterly jet there coming out of the Russian Far East on the south side of that low center, just west of the Arctic coast there, up to 110 knots over St. Lawrence Island, northerly 70 to 80 knots between these two systems here, the high and the low, right over the, looks like Atka Island, and then back to southwest and a little stronger toward the Komodorsky Islands. 9,000 feet here, westerlies right across the Bering Strait at 40 knots, diminishing to 35 knots. And then back up to 40 knots there in the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, pretty light winds here across much of the area, picking up way out west there ahead of the next front, but very light variable winds here at 9,000 feet across the Gulf, actually the Northeast Pacific and the Panhandle. And for 3,000 feet, same pattern, light winds over the Gulf from Bristol Bay eastward there to the southeast coast and into the interior. A little bit of a breeze here up to the north and northwest with those northerlies maybe up to 20-25 knots, and that's about it. And this low here may be kicking some winds up out of the east to 30 knots for the eastern Aleutians, False Pass, western Alaska Peninsula. And then the more active front way out to the west there with 40-knot winds, staying mostly west of the forecast area. And then for the turbulence, could see some isolated moderate here with that low just to the south of the eastern Aleutians into the western Alaska Peninsula, and possibly here out over Shimianatu with that front edging eastward. Otherwise, smooth everywhere else.